BWI is live at the start of NFL free agency, so I have to deal with the guys today. I'm a huge NFL fan. Dave is a Vikings fan. Nate doesn't care, but he's great at finding information, so what we're going to do is we are going to, if there is any sort of information out there that's important as news is breaking during the legal tampering period, we are going to go and we're just going to shout it out. So get ready, guys. It's going to be a fun show today, but it is also spring football. 1 week away today from the start of spring football. We're going to give you a preview of that. And, of course, it's the last hurrah, the swan song for Penn State Basketball as they lost on Friday in the Big Ten tournament. Their season is over, and I'm going to introduce you to the guys that are going to tell you about it. Here we have senior editor Nate Bauer joining the show. Nate with another healthy water choice. That one looks like it has electrolytes, and is that ionic water? Is that got ions and magic in it?
Yeah, it's total magic, and it's gonna make me healthy. I can't wait.
Yes, voodoo water, awesome. I don't want. Let's get Dave Eckert on the show today. Kirk Cousins gets a contract extension. Dave, how you feeling?
Yay! It's fine. I don't have a bougie water bottle though, so that's less fine.
Yeah,
I wish that I had some bougie water.
I have a smoothie. So this looks disgusting. It looks like some sort of pink slime you would see in a Ghostbusters movie. But
T. Frank, I want to stop you.
What?
Breaking news: Tom Brady is coming back to play football again.
Cool.
Is that new?
That was last night.
Whatever.
Yes, but still relevant today on the start of free agency because, I mean, it looks very different now for Chris Godwin, who was franchise tagged and coming off an ACL and an MCL, as opposed to coming back for the Buccaneers. He was injured in Week 17. They're making the playoffs now. Like, Tom Brady's back, the center is back. They're making the playoffs, so that changes, I think, the entire season for Chris Godwin and his happiness level of being stuck in Tampa Bay for another year. That's a realistic, once again, Super Bowl champion possibility, and Gronk is probably going back there as well. So that changes the entire outlook of the NFC and for one Chris Godwin. So that is a good thing for him, and I hate it. I hate it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So let's start with let's start with getting out our information of what we were going to talk about today. First off, as we mentioned, NFL free agency legal tampering period. If there's any Penn State news, Saquon Barkley rumored to be on the trade block in his final year with the New York Giants. Any of that information or news breaks, we'll get it to you. But also, Penn State related things. Troy Apke re-signs with Washington, special teams player, depth player in the secondary. Good for him. Penn State football starts spring practice in just a little bit, but recruiting is starting now. So our opening question today for you guys is, if you look at the Penn State roster and you had to pick one position that they need to target here in the spring to help out the ultimate goal of getting the roster better, what is the need and what are you thinking they need to go after, Dave? When it starts with when the unofficial visits and official visits are really ramping up today with Cam Lenhart on campus this afternoon, 4-star defensive end.
Yeah, if we're talking about the transfer portal, my choice would be the offensive line, right? And I think that's kind of obvious. I don't really think you need to explain it that much. I know they added Hunter Norzad. I know that maybe things look a little bit peachier with the younger guys there than they did previously. But still, I mean, the way that Penn State's offensive line played last year, if you can add somebody there, I think you do it. So yeah, that's what I'll go with.
Nate, what are you thinking about when it comes to? I'll open it up to the transfer portal as well in this spring period. That's another key part, and Dave's right to bring that up. When it comes to adding players either for the class of 23 or for in the transfer portal, what's a key need for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Dave's right. It's striking to me how much the conversation has evolved, even in the 15 years plus that I've been doing this. You used to look at the scholarship roster and project 2 years out right? It was like, oh, well, if they have a bunch of sophomores right now or juniors at a specific position, then you really need to load up in this next recruiting class to kind of make up for their losses. Well, that's not really the case anymore. And so, yeah, I mean, they need linebackers right now, and they need linebackers in the future. So take your pick. That would definitely be the position of need that I see the most. And I mean, certainly they've made it very clear that is something that they intend to address through the transfer portal, but also in recruiting.
Yeah, and linebacker, it's going to be interesting. I'm planning on writing something this week about Manny Diaz, and this is something people have asked me about when it comes to the structure of his defense. What are the differences? What might we see? And I was really hesitant because I don't know what he's going to bring from Miami. But linebacker, that's a big question too. Not just in the players that they have on the roster, but how many are they going to want? And is that going to change how they recruit based on Diaz being here? It's one of those things that we need to see a little bit of spring practice to know what we're in for when it comes to the defense in that particular area of the defense. When it comes to the offensive line, I think you make a great point, Dave. Specifically, the tackle position is something we've talked about all offseason long. But Penn State's in a really good position in the class of 2023 with the offensive line and some guys that I think can contribute early. So I'm going to go with defensive end because that has been a strong point for Penn State over the last handful of years, 5-6 years, of having either a depth of guys that are very good or having one or two special sort of players. Penn State doesn't really have either of those right now. Class 2022 coming in with a special player. Yes, Ken Talley going to be there as well with Dennis Sutton, but you need to stack those. And Penn State in the class of 2023, it is a deep class at defensive line in particular, but defensive end specifically. So getting a high floor, high ceiling guy to come in and be a part of that class and start stacking that, I think, is really important. William says he thought Tom Brady was coming back to play for Pittsburgh, which is... would Pittsburgh fans, after all the damage he's done, would you be happy about that? I'm not a Steelers fan, but there's no way on earth I would have that man on my team as a Buffalo Bills fan. There's just no way.
The alternative is watching Mason Rudolph 17 times. So,
That's a fair point.
Come on.
That's a fair point. I guess you would rather take the greatest quarterback of all time as opposed to a quarterback that's been in the NFL at some point. Normally, we would do this show where we talk about Penn State football. We get into some of the nuance, get into some of the storylines. But with Penn State basketball ending their season and going on a strong run in the Big Ten tournament, we're flipping things upside down. We're making an upside-down cake today. We're going to start with basketball. But that doesn't mean that if you have Penn State football questions, we're not getting to those today. So, just to reset everything so you know how the show goes if you're joining us for the first time. First thing is, every time I'm going to ask you to do one thing for the show. And that is, if you're enjoying the show, you're enjoying the talk, please share the video with your friends, family, wherever you want to share it. And like the video if you're having a good time here. That way people know, hey, this is a safe space for people who like football. That is super helpful. Secondly, if you want to ask a question, we're going to get to your questions later in the show. Best questions, intriguing questions, questions that stimulate my neurons in my brain. We'll bring those up on the show. And, of course, if you give us a super chat donation, we always make sure we get to those. So 2 ways to do that. Is, it's not obligated to give a super chat, but it's always super appreciated. You get a shout out and a verbal hug from me. Give you a little bit of that bro hug action. Always appreciated. But we're talking about Penn State basketball today. They play Purdue really tough all the way down to the end. And that's pretty indicative of the entire season, right, Nate? I mean, if you could encapsulate Penn State's season in one game, it's Purdue, a super talented, perennial, top of the Big Ten team that they take down to the wire, but ultimately they don't have enough to get over the hump. Is that a fair assessment of what happened in that particular game?
Yeah, I'm going to say something mean. I know. Play really hard, fight back, and then don't score any points in the last 2 minutes and 38 seconds. And so, That was kind of the story of the season. It's this really interesting dynamic right now for Penn State basketball between whether or not they're satisfied and happy with a 14-17 season where they played a ton of games, including against competition that was obviously better, had an advantage over Penn State, and they were close like all the time. And then at the end of the season, Dave, you can correct me on this, but I think it's going to be 10 games that they lost by 6 or fewer points, in that ballpark. And so, like, I think there's probably an opposite side of it and an opposite stance of what a missed opportunity for these guys, right? I mean, it was just this consistent level of, hey, playing really tough. They never quit. You can't help but like them as a team. They just really struggled to get over the top at the end of games. So here they are. And season's
what is
over.
that missing ingredient, Dave? Is that a consistent scorer? Is that an elite player, a transcendent player, an individual, or is that a team thing? When it comes to that late game, you need points, you can't get them.
Yeah, I think it is that transcendent player. If you look at who was scoring for Purdue down the stretch, there's a guy named Jaden Ivey who is going to be a top 5 pick this summer. So,
always helpful.
He's pretty good. Penn State doesn't have that. But it's also just shot makers, right? Even in the games that they won, Penn State didn't make shots. Penn State, they shot 8 of 26 from 3 in that Purdue game. They were Seth Lundy, 0 of 7 from 3. Dalian Johnson, 1 of 6. So those are like the auxiliary guys. And maybe it's not fair to call Seth Lundy auxiliary, but just generally, those are the guys that win or lose you games. Because Penn State has, with John Harra and Jalen Pickett, 2, I think, or had more accurately, very good players. Pickett's coming back, Harra's not. I think what they did or did not get from the guys around them kind of doomed them in these games. And I mean, if you look at the stats, I'm writing something for our magazine, which you can subscribe to if you'd like, shameless plug, this morning. And Penn State has the worst offense in the Big Ten and the best defense. So, they couldn't score points. And I guess it makes sense that at the end of games where teams tighten up, teams know they have to get stops. Maybe it makes sense that they couldn't get it done because they weren't really necessarily getting it done at all the other times anyway. But yeah, it's definitely a frustrating one. And maybe if they win half those games, we're talking about their first round NCAA tournament opponent. Certainly their first round NIT opponent. Instead of dissecting their season here.
So Nate, this is something we've kind of talked about throughout the season, but is it that you can focus so much on defense that you can be the number 1 defense at the sacrifice of your offense, or is it just we don't have any scores, we're going to focus on defense and it's going to be what it's going to be? Is that tilt of the court what caused the offensive issues that then become exposed in those late moments?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. Like, honestly, okay. I look at a roster that had players capable of scoring. They just didn't do it consistently. And I mean, Seth Lundy, like, you don't want to pile on the kid. And he's a guy who obviously has been around for a while and done some really nice things through his career at Penn State. But that's a game that's going to haunt him on Friday, right? I mean, just a no-show. And tried, plays really good defense, still played good defense. That effort was still there, but this was a season that they understood from the get-go relied on Seth Lundy being consistent and being a scoring presence because they knew that there weren't going to be that many other pieces that they could count on for 15 to 20 points a game.
Yeah.
It just, so when you have a guy in Lundy who is capable of that, you got to get 10. And for him to come away with whatever it was, Dave, 0-2 on Friday night, 2 points, that'll get you. And so that's
especially when they started on such a hot streak where they were out of the gates pretty well offensively, and then you could see the clangs once Purdue kind of got into rhythm. the missed shots and some of that stuff really came once Purdue settled in, and that's when the offense really kind of, I think, took focus of what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, but like that happens, right? I mean,
Right.
it's a game of runs. You're going to go up, you're going to go down. These things happen. Penn State really throughout the season, outside of UMass and maybe Indiana and maybe Nebraska, like pretty much kept every game to that 10-point differential where they were able to come back and able to make it a game late. But you can't live like that. And they ended up living like that through the course of the season and just never really had enough to get over the top.
Chase Edmonds going to the Dolphins on a 2-year, $12 million deal that affects nobody. I don't know if that's a good use of money either in the NFL. Where do you guys want to go with this now with Penn State basketball and kind of the season? We've talked about how the expectations, I think they largely met them, of being competitive in every single game as Nate just laid out. But what's your takeaway? Where do you want to go when you're reminiscing about the first season under Micah Shrewsberry? Dave, do you have any thoughts of what's next in your mind?
Yeah, that's what's next is kind of what I'm thinking about here, because they've just had a very positive end of the season, right? It's unfortunate they didn't win the Purdue game, but you win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. If you're Penn State, you're happy. So now they're kind of going to have the opposite dynamic from this season, in that they're going to be really young next year. Like, they're going to have 5 freshmen. They actually just sent out another class of 22 scholarship offer last week, which surprised me because my working assumption was that they were totally done. So maybe 6. And, this year they were all seniors, right? So can they not only equal what they did last season with this young roster, can they build on that? And
right.
I don't know that the answer is necessarily yes. I don't know that it's a fair expectation for that to happen based on what their roster is going to look like. These are talented kids, but they're kids, and they're going to have to play a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see not only how Penn State plays, but kind of how the fans interpret how they play. Because I think there is a little bit of a sense of expectation now based on what they did, and it's going to be a totally different scenario next season.
And that's you have that from a certain degree every year in sports, but you don't, as you described, don't go from the most veteran team to the most youthful team that you could have in that short order. Do you think that means that the transfer portal still open for Penn State next season? And with this offer extended, is that an indication of maybe they're not going to lean as heavily on the portal and they're going to go for the full rebuild now, play young players, develop them?
Yeah, I don't know, right? It's interesting. They have, so as it stands right now, if Miles Dredd and Sam Sessoms both choose to come back and nobody transfers out, they have 1 scholarship open. So if there are transfers out, then that gives them some flexibility, but there is not a whole lot of room to maneuver unless they offload some guys, which certainly I think there's some guys on the roster that are, that might have more of a future somewhere else. But, it's tough to predict what they're going to do in the transfer portal without knowing how much room that they have.
Right.
Because it's a smaller roster. It's not football where you've got 85 spots and there's way more cards to shuffle. It's like, if this card doesn't want to move, then you can't add the other card, man, So
right.
It's
Nate, what's your sense of that? What's your sense? I want to back up to something that I asked him previously, but I want to get your sense of that, of the roster and kind of where you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that if you're taking the broad picture view of this, Micah Shrewsberry had no choice but to rely on the portal in the first year because of the departure. You don't have time to recruit class of 2021 guys when you're arriving at a program in mid-March. And so, they had to fill a roster. They did. They filled it with older players. But the way that they approached the 2022 class, bringing in 5 guys, that's how they want to build the program. And he has said that throughout the season, that his intent and their intent is to build the program, right? To do really what Purdue is doing, which is bringing in freshmen, kind of cultivating them through their careers until they get to senior year and, have that type of success where it's a traditional model. I think that they need immediate help at forward. Has to happen right away. John Hara leaving, he doesn't have a choice. He has to go. That means you got to get somebody. Greg Lee leaving, doesn't have a choice. He's gone. So, and actually there was a little bit of question as to Greg Lee, whether or not he would have an opportunity for a 6-year, based on how much of the season he spent injured. He had a Instagram post, maybe Twitter post as well, yesterday on Sunday, described, basically saying like, hey, that's it. Season's over, career's over in college. And so no, they have to get immediate help there. So I think that they're going to be forced to go back to the portal, but just in general, this year would have been good for them as a program to initially start off with some postseason play, because it's probably not going to happen next year. Like, that's the dynamic that they're looking at is, yeah, you got some good pieces. Jalen Pickett coming back is huge. If Sam Sessoms comes back, that's huge. Seth Lundy coming back is huge. That's a good core 3 guys to build around. But when you're building around them with 5 true freshmen, 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids, that is a really, really difficult expectation. And so those guys are going to need some time, some seasoning, and they're not going to be able to have, and don't really want to have, the immediate help of big transfer, influxes, basically, of transfers.
So it sounds a lot like we're trying to soften the landing for a season that might be a little bit different next year. Do you think you'll see a different coaching style? So we talked about this season, about the way this team played was it set up with the players they had. Defense, slow the game down. Is that maybe going to change next year as well when it comes to you're changing the personnel, changing the talent on the floor, or is it still going to be focused on defense and slowing things down because you have young players that maybe can't keep up in a high-scoring game? What are your thoughts on that?
I would expect it to be more of the same.
Okay.
Just because, I think that's a good base. Like, I know it's not exciting, but I actually wrote like a column about this, and I know that Penn State fans don't love being compared to Rutgers in any fashion, but look at what Steve Peichel has done at Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, they're going to the NCAA tournament for a 2nd straight year. It would be a 3rd if they were, if they had played in 2020. And that's what they do, man. Like, they slow you down. They play gross, disgusting defensive basketball, and it works. And I'm not saying that's fully what Micah Shrewsberry wants to do here, but I don't think that if you are Penn State, if you are Northwestern, if you are Rutgers, and you are perpetually going to be facing a talent deficit almost every time you step out onto the floor against the top teams in the Big Ten, that I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. So, if Micah Shrewsberry at, 5 years from now has 5 4-star kids in every class, and Penn State is this awesome hub of basketball talent, then great. Then I think that that's a bad idea. That sucks. Nobody really wants to watch awesome athletic kids just defend and play slow basketball. But if you're trying to bridge the gap with less talent than your opponent does, then I don't hate it. I don't know. I don't know exactly what his plans are, but I can't imagine that deviating from his greatest strength this season would be like something he's rushing to do.
So what's I think everyone feels positive about Penn State basketball after the way they finished their season, and a lot of that had to do with John Harrah and that story specifically and how hard he played in certain games, and that being a huge catalyst for the way the season ended. And not to take that away from Micah Shrewsberry or the organization or anything, but it was a large part of the story. So given that you're both already forecasting maybe a bit of a step back next season, where do you say that this program is headed with the positivity that you got from year one, knowing year two is going to be very different? Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly in terms of setting a culture and trying to carry that forward, that's a good place to start. You don't have the influence of Hera though for the guys that are coming in next season,
right?
And so they're not going to see, like, they're going to see that on film, and that's something that Micah Shrewsberry talked about all season. Was, hey, this is stuff that we're going to use next year and the year after and years down the line. Of, hey, look at how crazy this guy is out on the hardwood, right? I mean, he plays with an effort that you can control. You can go all out all the time, and
right.
Most college basketball players don't, but it's possible, right? Like, expend every ounce of energy that you have. But some of the things that he said, Micah Shrewsberry, in his last post-game press conference after that game on Friday night, he made these like little asides about we're going to be back. We're going to be here. Like, this is something that you should more or less get used to, is Penn State being competitive and being in these types of situations. And then like the little throwaway line was, and maybe we'll figure out if we can, how to score a few more points. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so like, to me, there is this fascinating question, and Dave, like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, the book on Micah was that he was coming in with these great sets, right? Like, he was an offensive guy, and that was supposed to be his strength. And so, there's this dichotomy of, hey, he managed to take a team of, misfits in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you just had to throw them all into a pot and see what happens. But he got them all to play tight half-court defense. Like, that was the deal. It was tight half-court defense. But the inability, ultimately, like, he got them shots. They got good looks. Mm-hmm. They just couldn't make them. And so where does that come from? How do you manufacture literally 6 more points a game? Like, two more made baskets, 3 more made baskets changes the outcome of a lot of the games that they played in this season. And so does Jameel Brown, does he change that? Does that, like, do those shots go in next season? Right. And so, Dave, like, I see you shaking your head, like, maybe not.
Yeah. That's the thing with shooters, though.
Yeah, they did. And so, like, I think there's some question as to Miles Dredd, what his future is at Penn State. Mm-hmm. If he comes back, like, it just feels like at this point, you kind of know what you have with a lot of the older guys. And what you have is streaky. Yeah. Like, just very inconsistent. Sometimes they make shots, and Miles Dredd has made big shots in his career. He has made a ton of them and has won games for them. But also, are you maximizing that position? Are you getting the most that you can out of that spot when you really, 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 really need that spot to generate some points for you? So, no, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting offseason for them to see how they fill out the rest of the roster. And then the tack that they take moving forward. Like, what type of basketball team is it going to be? Are they going to shift away from just strong defense to actually, scoring more points, like getting more buckets, period?
Dave, final thoughts on Penn State basketball, where the future is going for this team.
Yeah. I totally agree with Nate. They need a big. If they get a big who is not only like a serviceable big, but a good big, then I think we can talk about achieving some things next year. But it's tough. Like, I'm excited about the trajectory of the program. I think fans should be too, but I would just hesitate to assume that it's just going to be up, because that's not how this works. Like, yeah. Sure. There are instances where, like, a coach just comes in and catches fire, and 2 years after finishing last in their conference, they make the NCAA tournament every year from then until the rest of the time. But, like, realistically, I don't think that's a fair expectation. So
let me ask you this, because it seems like a lot of this hinges on some positivity this offseason in the roster building. Let me ask you, do you think that, and in basketball, there's so many players in the transfer portal. That doesn't mean that you're going to get an all Big Ten or an All American big, but because those guys are obviously going elsewhere to the NBA or otherwise. But is there Micah Shrewsberry and what he can do at Penn State and what he proved in the first year? Do you think, Dave, he can get one of those bigs to come to the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, I do, because he got Jalen Pickett, right?
Right.
Jalen Pickett. Gonzaga wanted Jalen Pickett,
Right.
So, like, there's certainly he's proven that he can recruit. You look at what he's done with the high school kids, getting Jalen Pickett here. I do think that he is capable of landing that big fish. Whether if he can get Jalen Pickett at center, like, the outlook changes. But we'll see. Certainly with there are fewer bigs than there are guards.
Right.
So that makes it a little bit more difficult. But we got to see who's in the portal, and we'll see how Penn State attacks it. It'll be interesting. Definitely a lot that we don't know right now.
Let's get to our favorite segment of the day. And by our, I mean my favorite segment of the day. Our prediction game for 2021. Here's how this works. You, the fans, get to decide who the winner is here. And our question today for what's going to happen in 2021 is who will have the most yards from scrimmage on offense in 2021. Our view of Penn State spring football starts here. So, guys, we're going to go through this, and you're going to give your reason for why your player will have the most yards from scrimmage. What you think. We're going to start on the left with Nate and Parker Washington. What is your view of Penn State offense and Parker Washington?
T. Frank, I have some bad news, buddy.
What?
I think it's 2022, isn't it?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Listen.
I only wrote this twice because the system was making me mad, so I only had to write that 2 or 3 times. So thank you.
I'm just saying I would feel really, really confident making predictions for 2021 at this point. Like I would.
That's where you want. That's where you want to stay, right?
Jahan Dotson. Yeah. No, I'm gonna go with Washington just because I don't think that there will be a clear-cut running back. I think that they're all, not all of them, but right, Singleton and Lee, and maybe Ford gets in there, maybe Holmes gets in there, probably one of those 2 guys gets in there. And so if you're splitting carries between 3 running backs, it just makes it impossible for a running back to be the top yard from scrimmage guy. Just right. I mean, it's kind of a de facto position. And so, yeah, of the receivers, if Sean Clifford is the quarterback, and that's going to be my presumption, at least to start the season, that's his guy, right? I mean, that has to be his guy. He's got some chemistry there. Showed it in the Outback Bowl, and Parker, I think you would probably agree with this, through the end of the season, through the last half of the season, showed what he can do, right? I mean, he demonstrated that he can be a top target, and he can generate that type of production. So yeah. Easy pick.
I just want everyone to know before we get going here with Dave that I picked Dave's player. Dave picked Dave's player, and I gave him Dave's player.
Well, here's the thing, T. Frank. You gave me my player, who is Mitchell Tinsley. but you took the player that I think is going to win just based on how our chat tends to feel about this player based on previous experience. So let's not act like this is some kind of act of charity here, okay? But yeah, I picked Mitchell Tinsley. I feel similarly to Nate in that I don't necessarily think that the situation at running back is going to allow for that position to factor in here. So I think it's kind of a toss-up between Mitchell Tinsley and Parker Washington. Mitchell Tinsley has done it before at Western Kentucky. His tape is electric. You know, he's a great athlete. He does have the slight disadvantage of coming in fresh, kind of needing to forge that relationship with Sean Clifford right off the bat. But look, you know, we know what he can do. We've seen it. He's a veteran. Penn State has not hesitated to rely on its transfers, as we saw last season, heavily. So yeah, I'm going to go with Mitchell Tinsley.
I think that's a well-reasoned argument. So I'm going to give you my guy, and then here's what I'm going to do. Nick Singleton. Nick Singleton is great. Nick Singleton will be great. He's going to lead the offense and be an All-American candidate next year. Vote for me for Pander of 2022. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the argument for the other two guys, because this is how it went. I came up with this topic this morning thinking about, you know, what's a good topic to think of, and the reshaping of the roster. And my thought was Parker Washington. I didn't write it down. Nate wrote that down. So then I went, okay, yeah. Mitchell Tinsley. Yeah. So then I wrote that down, and Dave's like, I was going to say Mitchell Tinsley. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll take Nick Singleton. So Nick Singleton is the winner today. Like, Nick Singleton is he's going to take the job. He's going to go for 1,100 yards. He's going to be a great receiver out of the backfield, even though we've never seen that on film. And he's going to be an awesome pass protector, and he's going to be the number one running back. So please vote for me. But here's the argument for the other two. Parker Washington, slot receiver, running carries, jet sweeps, things like that. He is going to be involved in multiple areas of the offense, so he's going to have multiple different categories in which he can get yards. Mitchell Tinsley, here's the answer for him. Explosive downfield threat, the most valuable plays on the football field. He can go for 65 yards on one play and get 130 in a game. I don't know that, you know, it's going to take some math to get that for Parker Washington. So those were my reasons for those other players. But Nick Singleton, pander, please vote for me. I will lower your taxes and raise your whatever, and like all the things I promise. All the promises I can't
Thoughts
keep.
On the gas prices, T. Frank.
Hard pass. Hard pass.
Listen, Robert already voted for me, so I win. That's it.
All right. Well, we're going to keep the tallying open till the end of the show, or at least until I decide that it's over. So
shut it off.
Let's talk about spring football. We got about 20 minutes here to break down the biggest spring football storylines and position battles that are coming up next week. Everyone wants to know who versus who's going to win. That's what we're talking about today, or at least that's what I'll talk about today, in depth of what I see from Penn State's biggest position battles. And then we'll talk about the storylines. Those guys have it covered when it comes to sort of the threads that weave through Penn State spring practice. So do you guys want to start in the order I wrote those down, kind of going through the depth chart, or is there something interesting that sticks out to you that you think is most important to talk about? Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to talk about something non-specific, but that I love.
Okay.
Which is the vibe. I want to know what the vibe is.
What's the vibe? Professional, mercenary, like we're here to do a job, we're here to execute and to win, or like
I'm saying, like, you know, there's always like so preseason media day, right? Or Big Ten preseason media days.
Yeah.
Always has that, right? And so 13 teams have 3 players sitting at a round table, and they all say the exact same thing, which is everyone's counting us out this year. We feel disrespected, and our approach to this season is like we've never been more determined than we are this year. Fine. Penn State's had okay, 2 years ago, I'm counting it out. I know nobody likes that, but it is what it is. It was just a weird, messed up year. All right, fine. Last year wasn't good at all, right, for Penn State football. They won 5 games, and then they did not win many more, right? Two more the rest of the way. And a lot of the pieces, not all of them, but a lot of the pieces, certainly defensively, they've lost a lot. But a lot of the same cast of characters is going to be back for this season for Penn State. And so, like, what is the story? What, like,
right?
How are they carrying themselves? Are they like, is this the vindication tour? The what was it? You know, Michigan's revenge tour.
Yeah.
Right. Like, is that what we're talking about? Like, they were wronged by the officials? No, like, I don't see a clear, like, thing for this team. And I know that how stupid that sounds, but it's true. Like, there is no, we're coming off of something. They're coming off of a less than stellar year.
Last year was that, right? So last year was everyone's coming back for one more ride. And we knew that after the season, that 2020, we're not going out this way. That was from a bunch of the guys on the defensive side especially. This year, it's like, you're right. The major storyline outside of the program are the freshmen. But I don't know, Dave, what's your thought? You have a vibe.
My thought is that you don't need slogans to go 1-0 every day, T. Frank. That's my thought.
What's their latest thing? I saw something. There's like 83,000 seconds in a day. Make every second count. There's something I saw from Penn State football about that. I was like, oh, that gives that, like, I understand working hard and busting your butt.
They don't need more ammo.
It gives me anxiety thinking about, like, every second has to mean something. That's a great way to have some sort of disorder.
I don't even know about, like, a slogan. I'm just, like, I genuinely don't know. I don't have a feel for how the players themselves are, like, what is their talking point going to be? You know, like, oh, well, if maybe if PJ Mustipher hadn't gotten hurt, if Sean Clifford hadn't gotten hurt, you know, like, oh, well, we're healthy this year, right? Like, maybe that's the angle. I'm not sure. And so, like, I genuinely am curious to see how they present this, just because it's not, like, it can't be the same as it was last year.
Yeah. Dave, what are you thinking of, maybe outside of vibe, or what's on your mind as we're a week from spring practice, thing that you're thinking about?
Yeah, if we're staying away from, like, the individual battles to save that for later, I might kind of just say the coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
Right, year 2 of Mike Yurcich, Manny Diaz's first go around. That's interesting because, you know, I mean, it's not absolute, but Penn State has previously, at least on defense with Brent Pry, been a place where we've just kind of thought stability, right? Not much has changed. So now in 2 years, and Stacey Collins too on special teams. In 2 years, they've replaced all 3 of their coordinators. So I think that's interesting. How that situation is kind of developing, I think, is probably what I'm most curious about outside of, like, the individual player stuff. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I'll be thinking about that for sure.
I guess the thing I'm interested in is year 2 of Mike Yurcich. Does it make a difference for the offensive line? Just for the overall, you talk about vibe. What's the vibe of the offense? Do they feel like they're locked in and know what they're doing this year? Does it feel like there's clear, crisp communication? Do they all execute their assignments correctly? And then it becomes about the physical talent of the players, because last year it seems like there were systemic problems within the offense that were beyond just the physical limitations of some of the football players, even though I think a lot of that was driving those problems, because then you're trying to compensate for those particular problems, which leads you down the wrong path. So what is the offense like this year from a communication standpoint, and understanding and digestion standpoint from the players involved? Because you can have the quarterback know what he's doing, and then the offensive line not know what they're doing, and then all of a sudden you've got a quarterback that doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. So to me, how everything looks, and I remember last year, when we got to go to the second open practice. And I watched Sean Clifford make some throws, and I'm like, that was bad. There was none of those early in the season. So this is a time that was a time when they were learning the offense, they were learning to make the mistakes and come back and correct them, and they did. But what is the baseline this year to expect for the fall for the offense? I think that's an interesting storyline. But that leads me to the first situation I want to get to at quarterback, which is not Sean Clifford and the starting position. It is QB2. Here you have your contestants.
Oh, wow.
In the first running in the first running of spring practice battle, Drew Aller, Beau Pribula, and Christian Veilleux under the rack there. How do you want to handle this? Because I want to get into the X's and O's side of this. Is there a storyline or an interesting point that you guys are thinking about when it comes to the second quarterback situation and the quarterback room as a whole?
I mean, if I'll chime in here, I think that Christian, excuse me, Christian Veilleux is not being talked about enough, probably, right? I think that Drew Aller, like it makes sense to have the hype around him arriving at Penn State. I am 100% sold on my own reporting and research that I did a couple of weeks ago about first-year 5-star quarterbacks. They just don't play as a rule. And so if that's the case, and we know that, then I'm not saying that it's completely out of the realm of possibility for him to make that move and him to step up and, right, be great. Like, sure,
right.
That's a possibility. But is it a likelihood? Probably not. And so if it's not a likelihood, who does that leave? Leave Sean Clifford, who we know what he is, and Christian Veilleux, who I don't know that we do know what he is.
Yeah.
But I think that we know that he has some pieces there. Like, there are some ingredients there that could be successful. He had some successful showings in the opportunities that he did have. Can he make a push? Can right?
Yeah.
There's this, and it goes throughout the roster. This is something that goes way back to 2014 and 2015, which is players that start tend to perform better when somebody is nipping at their heels. And
you're getting ahead of me here. You're getting ahead of me here, Nate. You're hitting.
Did I steal your thunder?
Well, no, not necessarily, but it was going to be. It's the next logical thing. It's what we've talked about all off season. Is there anyone available to push Sean Clifford? And that has been my biggest question. Is the QB2 situation? I think if there's a player based on what we heard from Chuck Losey that is physically able to compete more so than, just the position, it's Beau Pribula, who is more physically developed, albeit he's not as big. That's the drawback there of Beau Pribula. What is his upward trajectory as an athlete? But Losey mentioned that Drew Aller was still learning some, working on his technique when it comes to his lifting. He did not have an advanced lifting background coming to Penn State. I think that's a huge positive for the future because he's going to get bigger, faster, and stronger, and he's already pretty big, pretty fast, and pretty strong. His arm is going to get better, but that leaves only Christian Veilleux as a guy that is the clear QB2. Where does that go, Dave? Do you think that there is enough to push Sean Clifford to make the opportunity for growth that Nate was just talking about? And I cut him off at the knees there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that. I don't know if I'm thinking about Sean Clifford, right? Like, I don't know that I view him as someone who needs like external pushing, just because if you've ever heard Sean Clifford talk or just sat in on a press conference, you know that he is extremely intense and extremely driven.
It might be the problem, truthfully. That might be his problem, is that there's too much drive.
Yeah. So as far as that aspect of it, I don't know if I'm like hugely concerned about the QB2's ability to push him. What I am concerned about is whether the QB2 can play college football if Sean Clifford gets hurt.
Yeah.
Because as we saw, that kind of had an impact on Penn State's season last year.
So are we in the same position that we were last season, despite the fact that there's more promise because we have seen some things out of Christian Veilleux? Are we in the same position, Nate, would you say, as last season, where that is a big question on the roster?
No, I mean, I don't think so, just because I think that Christian Veilleux has a better foundation to work from than maybe Taquan Roberson did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, but again, I mean, it's not even just, hey, break glass in case of emergency. It's, hey, Sean, you're not getting it done. We're going in a different direction, right? Like,
yeah,
that has to be a reasonable choice for, and we all know this, right? Like, James Franklin is hesitant about that. He doesn't want to give his starter the hook. He wants to play his start. He wants to name a starter and stick with that guy and let him work through some of the troubles that he experiences. But I just think that we've seen how this goes, right? And if it's not a viable option, they're not, like, it won't even be considered, and they need to be able to make that consideration. If you want to stick with Clifford because, like, through thick and thin, because he's your guy, he's coming back for a 6th year, like, all of that stuff, that's fine. That's a choice that you've made. But if you don't have a choice, you're backed into a corner, and that really leaves you just in an overall bad spot. So I mean, I think it is critical for those backups, whoever it is, either to push him to potentially take the spot and be the quarterback, or at the very least to present themselves as a viable, realistic, replacement if that is necessary.
So when it comes to the quarterback position, this, I guess, is what I saw from Christian Veilleux last year that I think should be encouraging, and to see how deep that vein runs is the decisiveness of Veilleux. That is the biggest thing, and that's not just as a passer. As a runner, I thought Veilleux did a great job of having good vision and making the right decision with the football. He might have been one of the more decisive runners on the offense. So that decisiveness coming through, I think that's what I want to see this spring. How far can that spread out? How confident is he in all situations? Because against zone, and I thought putting the ball on target, going even back to his high school, was a plus of his. So he's accurate and decisive. We are halfway there. Now we just need to see against zone, against a rotation, against when you have different situations on the defense where they're in a sub package. Are you recognizing what's on the field and where it's on the field? All of the second and third level things are what we need to know. But I think the bedrock of what Christian Veilleux is positive. That is hugely positive. I took a lot away from even the brief examples we had, because not to go with the sniff test or the looks like test, it looked right. He was making right reads decisively, even if he was making a mistake in the Rutgers game that he got bailed out to by a dropped interception or two guys running into each other. He threw the ball. He didn't hold on and look paralyzed as a true freshman in that situation. That, I think, is a confidence that you're not going to shatter at this point, certainly in spring. So how does that grow and develop? And does Sean Clifford get all the reps for the ones as a 6th-year player? Does he need all of those? Do you get to see more of Veilleux because of the situation? So to me, that's the part that I'm interested in the spring, is what's the leeway in that QB1A, QB2 situation of, because you have Clifford and because you want to learn more about Veilleux, do you have the opportunity to? So I think it's a fascinating situation. I left it as QB2 when we were talking about it in the group chat, but really it is all about the starting quarterback. Is there a guy that can step up? Here's another. Go for it.
Can I respond to Glenn just because I want to?
That's what I was going to. I was just going to bring this up. Let's all talk about this. Glenn has a fear that not playing Drew Aller will have him transfer, most likely because of the fear to Ohio State. Which is that is a kid from Ohio. I've seen that already from multiple places, that the fear is the kid is going to transfer. He doesn't play right away. Your thoughts, Nate?
you can't let the possibility of a transfer dictate your decision making. Like you can't. If you do that, you're going to be held hostage to it throughout the program. I understand Drew Aller is valuable. He and his family, like Sean Clifford, isn't invited back if they have a problem with that, right, in the first place. So that's the foundation of what I want to say. But the second part that I think is so critically important is this year's Heisman Trophy winner threw 22 passes as a true freshman.
Yeah.
Like, it happens all the time. 5-star quarterbacks, number one quarterbacks come in and they don't play their first year. It is an impossible position to play as a true freshman. Like, it is just so rare. And again, impossible is too strong of a word, but it's just so rare unless you are forced into it.
Yeah.
For that guy to like legitimately come in and win the job. And
can we talk about some of the examples too? Can I bring up a couple of the examples?
Absolutely.
Clemson and Trevor Lawrence. No offense is simple. Let me just start that. But the Clemson offense is simple compared to other offenses. If you have Travis Etienne, Justin Ross, and T. Higgins on that offense, along with, a veteran defense and a bunch of things, like, I'm not trying to take away what Trevor Lawrence did, but their offense, I've described it historically, is bubbles and goes. You throw the ball short, you throw the ball short, you throw the ball short, they crept up, okay, now we're going to take our 5-star athlete, run him down the field. As a quarterback, that's less processing for you. You just got to make the decision there, and you got to be accurate. And the thing that Trevor Lawrence did was, under pressure, he threw the ball accurately down the field to those players. That's great. Maybe Drew Aller could do that, but this is not that offense. This is definitely not that offense. Andrew Luck, his dad was a college quarterback. His dad was the dean, like the AD of a university. Like, he's an otherworldly smart person. And again, Drew Aller can be an otherworldly smart person, and he showed that on film, that he has football acumen and adaptability. But are you saying he's Andrew Luck? You have to prove that first before I'm going to say this 5-star athlete is that, because there have been a few of them that have come in as freshmen and really made a difference. The rest of them, if we were to dig into it, I bet you they would be athletes that played quarterback and figured it out as they went. They were not quarterbacks that did the quarterback thing. They didn't operate the offense like a Sean Clifford could. So they're exceptions, and they're pretty specific players that are 5-star quarterbacks that come in to make a difference. So
I don't think there's any risk of Drew Aller transferring if he doesn't play this year.
He came in with the knowledge and the understanding that you have to earn your position, so don't expect to start.
Literally, like, if anything, it is a safety net. These guys have someone else to take the bullets for them at the beginning of their career. And so, like, I don't see a down, like, if that's his expectation to come in and win the job from day one, good for him. But I have not gotten that sense. That is not anything that I've seen that suggests that that's, kind of their outlook on this.
Nate, you have done an excellent job today. And first off, I want to say you've done an excellent job of being an analyst on the show. You've also done an excellent job of doing the thing that I know secretly you wanted to do, which is not talk about the position battles so far. We got 2 minutes left in the show, and we have to get to one more of them, guys. So, of the position battles, Dave, you get to choose. Which one do you want to talk about?
Oh, boy. I think running back is the most interesting.
Okay.
And also probably the easiest to talk about at this stage.
All right. Give me 60 seconds.
Just 60 seconds. Okay.
Yes.
Kevon Lee is coming back. We know that he was not very productive, but we're not sure how much of that was his fault last year. So can Nick Singleton surpass him this spring? Probably not, based on what we've seen from other situations that are like this. But we also know that Nick Singleton is really good. So definitely something to monitor. How do the other guys fit in, right? How does Katron Allen fit in? How does Keziah Holmes and Devin Ford, who certainly will be wanting to factor into this offense fit. I just think there's like just so much to figure out here, and that's why I'm interested in it, because it doesn't seem like really anything is set in stone. And we kind of felt like this last year too, coming into the spring, except I think maybe we had a little bit of a different tone because we thought the running back room would be awesome, and it turned out not to be. But
there's more talent right now. I think that is a better distribution of talent than there was last season. I was talking about last offseason that there were some clear holes in the talent on the roster and specific skills. Nate, give me 15 seconds on the running back position.
Yeah, I mean, is Nick Singleton Saquon Barkley? Yes or no? I don't know, and that's gonna be the question. Is like, I think there are some reasons to think that maybe he is, but even Saquon Barkley needed 5 games to overtake Akeel Lynch as the starter for Penn State. So
who's a good football player? I always liked Akeel Lynch.
Good guy, yeah, good football player, but yeah, like it's very, very hard to cut. I sound so stupid saying it, but like, it's just this external conflict of, we work in a business of right. We're talking about recruits, and there's an expectation and an anticipation. And as for the fans' perspective, you can't wait to get these guys on campus, but there's this secondary side of it of, but very rarely do they make an immediate impact.
Yeah.
It's just very, very hard to do. And so with Nick Singleton, it's, hey, what is he? Is he a unicorn? He might be. He's the Gatorade National Player of the Year.
He just got another award yesterday too, like Mr. PA or something like that, or another award once he's, I guess you're not always in college at this point in your high school career, because he left about a semester early from high school, but he's still getting high school awards, and we're talking about him as a potential starter next fall as a freshman. I've tried to look at this, and maybe this is a mistake. I've tried to look at this since last season as what are the roles you need to fill, and what running backs can fill those roles. Early down back, I think you got some obvious, Kevon Lee. And I would also say Katron Allen, as far as a guy that can read and just get you yards when you need them. You got your explosive playbacks, Keziah Holmes and Nick Singleton. And then you've got guys that are third down, do-it-all, hybrid sort of players that can be pass protectors but also a threat in the running game or in the passing game. And that's the position I think is the biggest question mark to me is Kevon Lee showed some good things as a receiver, but he was downright bad in pass protection at times last season. So who's going to be the consistent guy in that area? That is up for grabs, I think, right now. Kevon Lee has to take a step forward this spring in that. And then it comes down to which one of the young guys, if they can carve out a role there. Is it Devin Ford? There's a lot to learn about that as well. The BWI live show wrapping up here for Monday. Make sure you like the video if you're hanging out with us and you enjoyed our conversation all the way from free agency, NFL, to Penn State basketball, to spring sort of roster battles. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We will be back next Monday with football. For real this time.